Maybe you're at a party and someone hands you a guitar without a pick, or maybe you're looking for more varied dynamics in your recordings. Learning to strum without a pick is an essential skill that I recommend for every guitarist. And there's more than just one way to do it. Each of the different techniques for strumming without a pick will produce a different tone quality and can be used creatively for different purposes. I'm going to demonstrate 5 ways of strumming without a pick and discuss the advantages of each different technique and what makes each technique sound different. Now, some of you might know some of these already, but let's see if you know all 5. Let's jump right in. First one has the softest dynamic, and that's using the flesh of your fingers. When doing this, you're going to use your thumb to do downstrokes, and then your finger to do upstrokes. One of the biggest advantages of this style is that it's easy for beginners. You don't have to hold on to anything, and it feels comfortable, it feels natural for most people when they're starting off. You can hear the direction of the strum because the up strums will naturally hit the higher strings more than the down strums, which will hit the lower strings more. So this is a great one to use if you're wanting a soft dynamic, maybe in the bridge part of your song or a breakdown part where you just want the energy to be brought down a little bit. This is a great method. With a soft strum, warmer. Number 2 is the most dynamic of all the different variations we're gonna do. And that's because we're using a combination of flesh and nail doing backhand strums. Using this technique, it's almost all down strums, meaning that we're gonna pluck with our thumb going down and then use the backs of our fingers to do a bright strum part. And this is great because it has a different sound between the bass notes and the chord part. So it's almost like 2 different things happening. Another advantage of this is probably one of the easier ones to do alternating bass. So when you hear these kind of old folk or country patterns where they're alternating the bass like this is a great way to start getting into that without being too terribly difficult. First, start like this, pluck the low E string with the thumb, and then just take your hand as curled like this, and then brush the strings downward with the whole hand. Notice a lot of the motion is coming from my arm. It's almost like I'm holding a pick, and you have that bounciness of the hand still. Once you can do that, try to alternate the bass, like something like this. Lowest 6th string, chord, A string, chord, E string, chord, A string, chord. Just go back and forth. Next one is the most versatile of all the techniques I'm showing you here, and it's called boom chuck. And it looks a lot like the first version that we did where it's all flesh, except the thumb is doing a lot more this time in the boom chuck. The thumb plays a bass note and the chord part. So without even any index finger, you have bass chord, 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 bass chord. And doing this by itself for a lot of people can be actually kind of easy. One of the things that makes boom chuck very versatile is that additionally you can use the index finger coming up in between the thumbs to get more interesting rhythms. But the most important thing is making sure that you have a good boom and chuck with the thumb. The problem a lot of people have when they start doing this is they just do a single note chuck like this. And that's not the same effect, and that's not boom chuck. Boom chuck means you're doing boom, and the chuck is a chord. So boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck, boom chuck. So every time you do the boom, it's always on either the A string or the E string, and then the chuck part is basically the D string on. You can make the chuck as big as you want, like this. Or you can make the chuck kind of small. Either way, it needs to be at minimum 2 strings. It's got to be a chord to be boom chuck. Otherwise, it's just a pattern pick, which is not strumming. The next method is called the invisible pick. And this is probably something that a lot of you have already tried to do, but I want to show you some tips that are going to make it sound a little better. Now, when you do the invisible pick, the advantage here is that it feels the most like using a pick. So what you do is you're just holding your hand like this, your fingers, with your thumb kind of on top of your index finger in a comfortable way. There's a lot of right ways to do this, but basically what you're doing is you're simulating holding a pick. Now, what this does is when you go down, you're going to go downstrokes with the back of your index finger, which gives a very bright sound because you're using part of your nail. Now you can see I don't have long nails, I have short nails, but if you have somewhat of a nail at all, it should give a brighter sound versus the flesh. Here's the nail versus flesh. One of them's bright, one of them's what we call warm. Upstrokes will be with the back of the thumbnail. So you can have this rotational mechanic like you've learned probably already from using a pick. You need to do this rotational mechanic. And this sounds the most like a real pick. And it's actually the easiest for most people to jump into as well because it has that familiar feel to it where you're holding your hands like this. It's also fairly easy to do walk up and walk down. Number 5 is something that is for beginners. This is definitely the easiest one to do, although it does have some disadvantages. Here's how it sounds. It's just using your finger or your thumb only. A lot of people feel really comfortable just strumming with just their thumb when they first start, or strumming with just kind of a finger like this, or multiple fingers. Now this is okay, there's nothing wrong with it, except for the fact that it doesn't have a very consistent tone. You'll notice that the downstrokes have the bright tone, and then the upstrokes will have a warmer tone if you're using your fingers. If you use your thumb, it's the opposite. You'll have a warm tone going down and a bright tone coming up. Now that's not terrible. There's nothing really wrong with that, and you can use that creatively if you want. But for beginners, there's a lot of things that we have to think about, like left hand, trying to figure out these chords and memorize it. There's so many things to think about that it might not be great to immediately start thinking about all the right hand techniques that you need for strumming. So for a lot of people, when you're first starting out, it might be a good idea to just try strumming with just your thumb or just your index finger. Now as a bonus, this one's kind of related to that, but it's used a lot differently. And it sounds like this. And this is really just used kind of like as a sound effect. You often see jazz players doing this kind of like as an ending to their song. Basically what you're doing there is you're just taking your index finger, placing it across, usually in this warmer section of the guitar, being on the top of the fretboard here. And it really helps to plant a finger here to anchor against. And then you're just going to shake your hand against that anchor point and try to do it kind of as fast as you can. Very soft. It's mostly just kind of a sound effect, but it's a fun thing to do and it's a fun dynamic to add to your playing.